Israel Update with Gadi and Mike Duran.
Hello and welcome to Tablet's Israel Update. It's 241 days since this war began. We are recording on a Tuesday. It's the 4th of June and 4 days to the Gantz ultimatum. What do you say?
The clock is ticking. The clock is ticking. Everyone is waiting. What will he do?
We should have a clock going backwards, counting down to Gantz's ultimatum. So many things happened. It's not clear that anyone would remember the ultimatum, let alone that this would be the issue. I don't know if you saw it, but they're already maneuvering out of the idea that he would leave the coalition because there is no plan for the day after, because that has no traction.
Hold on. I feel like I interrupted you. You didn't say who you are and who I am.
Oh, that's because I'm still trying to find that out. You know, in the Onion, there was a story with a picture of a guy on a sofa, a fat guy eating, I don't know, nachos, and the headline said, "Search for self called off after 38 years." So I found myself, now that we're discussing that, Gadi in Tel Aviv, and Mike Duran is back in his office with a fresh joke about
joke?
The headquarters, Mike.
Oh, the headquarters. The headquarters.
Hey,
I got a joke
today.
I heard a joke.
This is a very serious week. I think we.
Can I start with a joke anyway? I think we need to. We don't have to be grave just because we're serious.
But in Israel we say "tzochek mi shetzochek acharon."
Okay.
What would you say in English?
He who laughs last laughs best. No.
Okay. I didn't know there was a formula.
Yeah.
For it. Yeah. So unbelievably crazy week. A lot of fog. It seems some of it is clearing. We had the Biden speech, which had shockwaves all around. And now we have the north of Israel literally burning with huge fires around Kiryat Shmona. So imagine that in our news cycle, on our Twitter, that has eclipsed Biden's speech, the alleged hostage deal, and all the rest. But let's first lay it out for our viewers and listeners in the news.
Okay, I've got 7 items, and the first one, of course, everybody already knows, and that's that Biden, in remarks in the White House on Friday, said that Israel had offered a new proposal, which has been submitted to Hamas by Qatar, and Biden called it a roadmap for an enduring ceasefire and the release of all hostages. It's time to end this war and for the day after to begin, Biden said. And the second item, Prime Minister Netanyahu said yesterday in the Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee of the Knesset that he would not agree to ending the war until all of the objectives had been reached. Those objectives, of course, are the defeat of Hamas militarily and the defeat of it politically, so that it doesn't have the strength to rule Gaza. He stressed that Israel would insist that the conditions for the ceasefire with Hamas would be accepted, and that it reserves the right to resume the fighting at any time if Israel is of the impression that the negotiations are pointless. In a third item, Gadi, what you just mentioned, the fires. Firefighters have been battling fires that were caused by rockets and missiles in northern Israel for more than 20 hours. 4 firefighting planes were scrambled at first light this morning to extinguish the fire near Amiad and help to put it out. But there are also fires raging in Yehuda v'Shomron, in the Judea and Samaria, which is that have been set by arsons, that is the Palestinians who are trying to burn, tie down Israeli forces, but also burn Israeli settlements. In the fourth item, the death of hostages. The IDF announced last night the deaths of 4 hostages. These are in Gaza: Chaim Perry, who was 79, Amiram Cooper, 84, Yoram Metzger, 80, of Kibbutz Nir Oz, and Nadav Papelwell, 51, from Kibbutz Nirim. And the fifth item, demonstrations have started about the hostage question. After the announcement of the hostages' deaths, the demonstrations erupted in Tel Aviv and in Jerusalem. Einat Zengauker, whose son Matan is a hostage, said that the announcement of the deaths of the four hostages proved that the military pressure on Hamas had failed to achieve its objectives. She said, and I'm quoting here, "We received unequivocal proof this evening. These are the results of the military pressure. We are getting them back dead," unquote. In the sixth item, an Israeli official, an anonymous official, but who the press is describing as well informed on the hostage issue, strongly criticized Prime Minister Netanyahu, and he said that Netanyahu was undermining the chances that Hamas would agree to the Israeli proposal that President Biden presented on Friday, because Netanyahu was highlighting the issues on which there was disagreement. He was referring primarily to the issue of ending the war, which will only be discussed toward the third stage of the deal. The army is taking practical steps for administering Gaza on the day after. And that leads me to the last and seventh item, and that is that the army presented a plan, or Defense Minister Gallant, more specifically, presented a plan to the War Cabinet last Thursday. This is a pilot plan in the northern Gaza Strip, which will begin soon. And it's an effort to build a cadre of Palestinians in Gaza who will administer the area, a cadre of Palestinians that is neither Hamas nor the Palestinian Authority. The Israelis started something like this a few months ago, but Hamas managed to kill the Palestinians that were the clan, the Domush clan leader, who was leading that effort. But we need to watch this. This isn't being well reported, but I think it's one of the most important items, actually, in terms of understanding where this is all going to lead in the end. Over to you, Gadi.
Yeah. So first, what you mentioned about the anonymous source that criticizes Netanyahu, that the hostages' families taking the line that military pressure is counterproductive, that is an organized campaign. It's very clear that the last hostage deal was achieved only when Hamas had its back to the wall. Hamas is in a much more comfortable position when there's a ceasefire. They can drag the negotiations, and they have the Americans working for them, and the Israelis keep improving from the perspective of Hamas, keep making more and more concessions. So clearly, the fact that this line has been repeated by officials, by the press, it's part of the organized attempt to stop the war. These are the strata of Israel's society, very powerful, who are working with the Biden administration in order to stop the war. Now, the funny thing is, I remarked this on Channel 4 yesterday, apropos of this woman who we'll see later in My Dumbest Take, Professor Yael Sternhell.
Channel 4 is Channel 14?
Channel 14, yeah, I said 4?
Yeah.
Well, I'm slightly British. And so my comment was that they think that they're working with the Americans to achieve the same goal. What they have in mind, what the left here has in mind, is they think that if Israel does not win this war and will be weakened and chastened, and we will still have Biden in the White House willing to pressure Israel, then there would be a decisive move towards the two-state solution. The left here has given up on convincing the Israeli public. It's given up on democracy in general, and it now yearns for American imposition, for the adults in the room to make the right move and then impose peace on us. They also think that after that, we'll have Saudi normalization and then a grand coalition against Iran. And I see you smiling, and I know why, because they certainly don't understand that the Biden administration is using them for its own purposes. And it's not just that we've been talking about this endlessly, about the fake narrative that some grand coalition led by the United States is waiting around the corner to form against the Iranians. These people they have become so focused on the Palestinian issue that they do not pay attention to the fact that we are at war with Iran, and that the disagreement with this administration is not tactical. It's undermining
Strategic.
our existential interests. And they so recklessly, they think they are buddies with the Americans. They think the Americans and they are, as she said, I think she said, the officials who have a humanitarian outlook or something to that effect. I'm not sure it's in the clip that we'll show. I don't remember now. But they think of the Americans as, the good people. The good people here, the good people there will work for a good cause. And they do not understand that we are now facing an administration hell-bent on appeasing Iran, and who has set the region on fire, and we will, and the consequences may be deadly for the state of Israel.
I of course agree with every word you said, but let's do this a little bit more systematically. Let's start with our discussion of Biden's statement last Friday. We'll analyze that.
We're hanging on to the end of the news. Yeah, we're gonna
end up, I think, the two of us in total agreement on everything that you just said. But let's start with the analysis of his. Let's get your response first, and then, or we can start with me if you want, whatever you want.
Let's start with you. I'll tell you later how and why I was so confused over the last few days.
Okay. So first of all, it was an amazing performance. I mean, when I say amazing, it was weird. That's the political science term for what we saw is just weird. Why weird? Because you had an American president come out and announce an Israeli proposal, and which is, Gadi, you may not be aware of this. I know that you're a professor, but you don't spend a lot of time watching foreign policy. But usually, the usual practice in foreign policy is that American officials announce American initiatives, and Israeli officials announce Israeli. That's the way it's usually done. It's very rare that an American official announces an Israeli thing. And when governments do announce the positions of allied governments, they usually coordinate with the ally ahead of time, and they send drafts back and forth to make sure that they don't say anything that is unpleasant for the ally or difficult for them politically. But President Biden chose to announce an Israeli initiative when Shabbat had already entered, and no Israeli official could actually go out and shape the initiative publicly. And of course, then we also learned that there was very little coordination. The Biden administration gave a very, very short heads up to the Israelis that the statement was coming, and they of course notified Gantz and Gallant before they notified anyone close to the prime minister, who's the guy who's on the hook for the whole thing. So there was this kind of disingenuous.
And not only that, he also, it looked, and this is why it looked weird to me, even from just a TV drama performance perspective. He announced an Israeli initiative and then pressured Israel to accept
urged the Israelis to accept their initiative. Right. That's actually the weirdest thing about it all. Is you're right. Is that he announced an Israeli position and then urged the Israelis to accept it. So sensitive observers, I think, noted that this wasn't exactly that he was doing something other than what he said he was doing. Of course, the friends of the friends of Biden, I'm talking about in the pro-Israel camp here in the United States, they immediately ran out to explain that this apparent disingenuousness was really sincere, because we can understand that because of the paragraph where Biden said that there were elements even in the governing coalition who might scuttle this. So an obvious reference to Smotrich and Ben Gvir. And so Biden was afraid that conniving, cunning Netanyahu was going to scuttle this because of course he is, as they see it, he is the captive, or as they want to present it, he's the captive of Smotrich and Ben Gvir. Although he put forth this proposal, he might then try to scuttle it. But that already is, even if we accept that interpretation, which is, I believe, very tendentious, it can only be true if the United States pressured Netanyahu into making this proposal, which we know is true because we know the United States has been pressuring Israel at least since the State of the Union address, but I think even before that, to make more and more concessions to Hamas. And what Biden presented on Friday was very, very, very close to what the press told us the Egyptians presented to Hamas in the last go around, which had really upset the Israelis. That is, the Israelis made a proposal that the Egyptians presented to Hamas. The Israelis made a proposal which they presented to the Egyptians, and then the Egyptians presented to Hamas a proposal that went further than what the Israelis wanted, further in the sense that it went all the way to a cessation of all hostilities, which is what Hamas wants. So clearly, the administration is pretty much on the same page as where the Egyptians were when they presented a proposal to Hamas to end the war entirely. And Biden, of course, said he wants to end the war. Okay, so listen, a lot of words. The bottom line here is that there's a fundamental disagreement about the war aims between the White House and Netanyahu, because Netanyahu wants the total destruction of Hamas militarily and politically, and the White House wants to stop the war now and deal with the Hamas remnant, and more than remnant, the rump Hamas in Gaza, deal with it as a political factor on the ground. The White House is saying it doesn't want that, but the two positions don't add up. The two positions of saying we want to stop the war now and we don't want it to resume. We want a complete end of it right now, and we want a Gaza without Hamas in the future. There's no way you get to a Gaza without the Hamas if you stop the war now. So what do they want to do? They want to stop the war now, which is what you and I have been saying for, I don't know, months, I think.
For very long. But I think the picture is slightly more complicated here, and I can tell you how just by tracing what I went through, because although it was Shabbat, Netanyahu issued a statement saying that we stick by our war aims, including the complete destruction of Hamas. And then I thought, so Biden is actually lying. That was my first initial response, and then I thought they must know that this would be the result, and so I thought this is not a move to secure a hostage deal. This is a move to topple Netanyahu, and I wrote a long tweet about that in Hebrew saying that. But then things started appearing on social media here saying no, it's very, very close to the Israeli proposal. And so a scramble began to try and understand what the Israeli proposal actually is. And the Israeli proposal turns out to be very far-reaching. It includes a 6-week ceasefire to begin with in stage 1 in return for 33 hostages, apparently also some of them not alive. So Israel has also made another concession saying that not all hostages that we will get back would actually be alive. And then after this phase 1, there's a second phase, which would be a negotiation about the return of other hostages. And there are other provisions. There were different versions in the press. It was clear that, I didn't say, on phase 1, Israel will retreat from all population centers. So it began to look like Israel was making concessions it will not be able to bounce back from, because if after all that we have a phase of negotiations, people started saying, well, we won't be able to resume the war. After 6 weeks, an increase in aid, retreat of IDF from population centers. It was not clear if Israel agreed to the return of whom to where. Apparently, there was some statement that said that returning populations will be screened for terrorists. But there began a virtual hysteria on the right-wing feed saying this is a surrender. This is a surrender to Hamas because we will not be able to renew the war effort, despite the army staying on the Philadelphia corridor and the Netzarim line corridor, the Netzarim route that separates the Gaza Strip into two just south of Gaza City. So people started saying this is defeat, and even on the left there was a very long article by Professor Azar Gat, who is an important guy because he is probably Israel's most prominent military historian. He's not a historian of the Israeli military. He's a historian of the military in general. And he said, let's not delude ourselves. If we make these concessions to Hamas, we will not be able to root them out.
I didn't see that article. Where did that appear?
It appeared actually on N12. And that's funny. N12 is the left-wing Channel 12 outlet. And that's weird because people ask, how come this sounds like the position that we are hearing that Smotrich and Ben-Gvir are taking. How come this appears from a leftist on N12? And apparently, this can be funny, but maybe it's actually true. You know, the whole Biden thing was coordinated clearly with the anti-Netanyahu protest. And how do we know? Because the professional protesters, Shikma Bresler and all that, started calling this the Netanyahu offer. She actually wrote a tweet saying, Bibi, don't walk out on the Netanyahu offer. So they were coordinated with Biden. And then you could see the people from Brothers in Arms, known in the United States as Brothers and Sisters in Arms, saying, Biden calls, we report to duty. They actually said that. So, and then there was supposed to be a huge demonstration, but there wasn't a huge demonstration. So it was clearly coordinated with these guys. And my guess, which might be taking this too far, that N12, with their anti-Netanyahu instinct, said, oh, it's the Netanyahu deal, let's attack it. Let's attack it from the right too. But anyway, they published this piece by Azar Gat, who said, the minute we lose control of all the borders, Iran will resupply Hamas. There will be a greater monster there. And I don't remember if he said that or it was someone else, but it was going around in Twitter, people saying, if we let Hamas stay on its feet, Yihya Sinwar for 1,000 years hence will be the new Salah ad-Din. And so the right-wing feed began popping up attacks on Netanyahu, saying, what are you doing? You should have, your line is, we are going to win this war no matter what. Is that just empty talk? If you are going to drive the IDF into a situation where they can't continue the war, you are renegating on your own mission. And so a further layer reneging, sorry. And so a further layer of interpretations came about where people started saying, well, this deal goes so far towards Hamas that his right flank will leave the coalition. This is the famous Ben-Gvir and Smotrich. We'll say more about that because Ben-Gvir and Smotrich actually represent the opinions of most Israelis on this. And so they said, well, Netanyahu must know this. So is he trying to make the first step to a new election? Instead of letting Gantz fulfill his ultimatum, then Netanyahu will say, look, the Smotrich and Ben-Gvir dragged me into a new election. Your favorite commentator, Amit Segel, said that doesn't make any sense. It's not like Netanyahu.
It makes no sense to me. Okay, I have to admit, this is all very interesting what you just said to me, because I was busy with a lot of personal things this weekend, and I only had time to stay on top of the key things. I didn't follow any of the discussion anywhere, so I didn't know any of this that you just said. I appreciate hearing all that. Let me ask you one little technical question. Just I'm curious. Azar Gat is he known as just an historian, or is he known as a right-wing historian? Is he?
No. He's a left-wing historian. And he is a two-statist. He also thinks that at the end of this war, some kind of cooperation with the Palestinian Authority should be arranged. I've had a few conversations with him. He has never left the idea that we need a two-state solution, and so his article was framed from that position, and its headline was that we should not have any illusions about what leaving Hamas on its feet means. Which, if you look at from the perspective of two-statists, this was a critique of Netanyahu all along, because Netanyahu preserved the separation between Hamas in Gaza and the Palestinian Authority in Judea and Samaria, so that there is no united Palestinian leadership with whom to make a deal. So, so this is not Azar leaving his traditional position, but also I appreciate the honesty here, because the whole left rallied behind this deal, because the left, as I said in my opening remarks today, thinks that this is the deal is the first step to a Palestinian state, to a two-state solution, because it would be easier to impose it on Israel at the end. And Azar Gat said, look, this is playing with fire, and we can't afford to have a mega terror state on our borders again.
Oh, that's right. But that explains why N12 published it, because it's coming from a left, as a left-wing.
Half explains, because they are so strongly, their line is, if you look at the Israeli media, they are arranging a failure for Netanyahu. That's what they're busy doing. And this is why the Biden administration and the Israeli elites, they share the intermediary goal of removing Netanyahu at all costs. And Azar Gat's article is not helping in that, because it strengthens the position that Netanyahu is now the standard bearer for, which is we must defeat Hamas.
Well, that's what here's my take. And as I said, I haven't been able to follow all the commentary on this, but what you just said when you presented the people on the right are asking, is Netanyahu starting to get ready for elections or whatever? None of that makes any sense to me. On a gut level, I think that he calculates something very simple. If you look at his messaging for the last 3 months or 4 months, I don't know when, it's he's been unbelievably consistent, and he's remained consistent in the last couple of days of saying we're gonna fight until they are defeated militarily and politically, and there'll be no place for Hamas in the post-war Gaza, and we will continue the war to achieve that. And I think he calculates that if he insists on that through every stage of these negotiations, that we won't get from stage 1 to stage 3, that it will break down in stage 2, because he understands that Hamas is never, ever, ever going to give up all of the hostages. It never is. There's no way. This is all they have. This is their lifeline to survival, and he understands that. You can't say it because it's a very harsh and unpleasant reality for Israelis to absorb. But what the other thing he knows is that the Israeli public is 100% behind him. Not 100%, but the overwhelming majority is in agreement that Hamas cannot be left in power. And as long as he insists on that, then the deal that Biden thinks is going to happen, which is we get a 6-week ceasefire, and that inevitably leads to a complete ceasefire. That will not happen, because it will break down, because Hamas is not going to ever accept it.
So I'll tell you what I got a lot of phone calls over the.
Did I make sense? I think I made that sound.
Absolutely, yes, you did.
Okay.
You did.
Okay.
So, but I'll say what caused the turmoil on the right-wing feed, and also among some of the smartest right-wing pundits and intellectuals. And I've had many conversations over these few days, and one party is saying we will not be able to renew the war. This is an illusion. Once we give up this, get out of the population centers, stop fighting, let people return to their homes, we will not be able to renew the war, because not only will there be logistic problems, how will you renew the fight if people return to populated areas? We'll need to clear them again. It will take a long time again. It will be difficult, and we will face enormous international pressure. Once the war is already stopped, starting it again will be close to impossible. So what would be your answer?
Well, first of all, I would say that it's a serious argument, and just to add to its seriousness, that is undoubtedly what the Americans are telling Hamas, or what the Egyptians are telling Hamas in the name of the Americans, or the Qataris, is they're saying, all right, you're not going to get a guarantee from the Israelis, but you're going to get a guarantee from the White House that the White House will do everything in its power to make sure it doesn't start again. And that's already that semi-American promise is already there in Biden's statement. So it's a very serious argument, but I think that the Israelis that Netanyahu just has to stick to his guns, just like he did on Rafah, right? There was an attempt to stop him going into Rafah, and he conceded to the Americans on Rafah because he didn't go all the way in. He didn't. There isn't a complete occupation. They took the Philadelphia corridor, and they're doing operations into Rafah, raids into Rafah, but they're not actually occupying the whole thing. The IDF says that's all it needs in order to complete the mission. That may or may not be true. I don't know. Let's assume that it is. But I think that Netanyahu assumes that he will pursue Hamas in that way, and pursue the negotiations with the Americans in that way.
Okay, second interpretation. This is indeed the question. Will he or will he not be able to continue the war? Second interpretation, which you hinted at in the news, is Netanyahu is insisting now that Hamas will be defeated because he wants this deal not to come through. He assumes Hamas will not easily yield anyway. And so for him, according to this logic, this is a win-win, because he has enormous pressure from the Americans, and he has enormous pressure from the Israeli press and from the Israeli left and from the representatives of the IDF in his cabinet and from the IDF brass. I'm referring, when I say the representative of the IDF, I really mean the representatives of the Americans, the Glanzenkot faction, Gantz, Eisenkot, and Gallant, who are more or less on the same page with the Americans. And so Netanyahu will take off all this pressure for him, because he can say, look, I did my best. I went this far, and Israel can't go further than that. And there's no one to make a deal with. So internationally and domestically, he will improve his position by having earned the credit of being willing to go to an agreement. And then if the agreement is not reached, he will save his coalition, because Smotrich and Ben Gvir will not have to topple it, and he can continue pursuing the war as he thought.
Why is this a second interpretation? That's exactly what I thought. That's what I just said.
No, because the first interpretation assumed that he is willing to go for a deal, and then we assume the question: what happened if the deal comes through?
So it's a game of percentages. He's taking a position, and he probably calculates that there's a 70-30 chance that Hamas will actually accept this right now.
30-70 against.
Yeah. He thinks that Hamas probably won't accept, but if Hamas does accept it, there will be pressure to stop the war, but he's laid down a very, very clear marker. Look at what I read to you in the news this morning. I, of course, just am repeating what the mainstream Israeli press is saying. they're already the left wing, the Shikma Bressler wing of the Israeli politics. They're already saying Netanyahu is scuttling the deal. He's scuttling the deal. Like, look at this guy, whoever the anonymous senior official who's familiar with the hostage negotiations. Who is that? Is that Gantz? Who do we think that is? I don't know. Whoever it is who's leaking to the press about this is really upset because they thought that they thought that Biden was cornering Netanyahu and putting him in this impossible position. And Netanyahu, by just sticking to his guns and saying we're going to fight to the end, is scuttling the deal. So and they feel the Shikma Bressler wing of the Israeli politics feels the Israeli public agreement that the Azar got. They feel that even people that they talk to in their dinner parties are saying, well, we can't leave Hamas in power. How is it that Biden wants to leave Hamas in power? That there's not any normal Israeli, regardless of left or right, who's sitting there listening to Biden and thinking, oh, this is great. That's not happening.
So one further interpretation.
All right, well, first of all, I said that as a statement, but I wanted you to. Am I not right?
No, I think you're right. I think you're right, and you're right also that these interpretations don't contradict each other, but they are different shades. And so let's call it another layer, not another interpretation. Which
sorry, I'm sorry. One more thing. Let's remember this is the same Netanyahu who made the Bar Ilan speech, right? That so upset the right wing because he accepted the possibility of a two-state solution in the Bar Ilan speech. Back when was that, 2011? I can't remember. Right? He's very good at this. He goes as far as he could possibly can toward the Americans, give them what they want, but insisting on key principles that he knows are unacceptable to Palestinian nationalists. This is a classic Netanyahu.
This is his line. So the further thing I wanted to add has to do with what's happening in the north, and I'm not sure, I can't quote him on the record. It's a mutual acquaintance of ours who's also a historian. It's not a Zargat, who said, "Look, it's not even up to Netanyahu to stop this war. He will not be able to, regardless of what's happening in the coalition, because." As we said many times on this show, there are people who will not return to their homes, and they provide a constant reminder that this war cannot end just because we want it to, or just because we say it can end, because no Israeli prime minister can live with a situation that now, for the first time since the War of Independence, parts of Israel were evacuated by our enemies. And there is no way, no dovish government, nobody can just sit back and agree to that situation. But look at what's happening in the north. While Biden is trying to put out the fire in Gaza, what is happening in the north now is unbearable. And you can see even the left-wing press, which obviously wants to attack Netanyahu and everything. I'm gonna have screenshots of every Nadav Eyal tweet, because they're now, why is Netanyahu doing nothing in the north? They've abandoned the north, and so of course
that of course was part of Gantz's ultimatum.
Yeah, of course.
He flanked Netanyahu to the right on the north.
Why am I taking screenshots? Because the minute something starts in the north and the Biden administration says stop it, they're going to scream that Netanyahu is waging a political war for his own egotistic interest and blah, blah, blah. And so you see Yair Lapid risibly also said, the government it deserted the south, now it's deserting the north. So all these leftists are now banging the war drums, which is the funny part of it. But the not funny part of it is that everyone, and on the right-wing feeds certainly, saying, well, it's enough talk. Why is the security zone inside Israel and not inside Lebanon? Why are we not setting on fire everything south of the Litani River?
Yeah.
Why is Beirut not burning?
And what is the answer?
And the answer is that we can't do them both now. That's at least my answer. And
No. The right answer is because Biden came to Israel on October 10th or whenever day he came on October 10th. He said, don't. Anyone who would take advantage of this situation to widen the war, don't.
and especially to the north. But this is why I said
that was understood by, sorry, I'm talking over you, but that was understood by Israelis at the time as directed at Hezbollah and Iran, but it was directed in addition at the Israelis, and they know, the Israeli elite knows this.
But these arguments are complementary. When I said we can't do both at the same time, we can't. We have limited ability to defy the Biden administration, and doing it on two fronts now will bring down American pressure that would, I mean, the Biden administration will go berserk, because if we are right, Mike, and their whole play with the war in Gaza is to save their regional integration, i.e. the appeasement of Iran policy, then if we start a war with Hezbollah, a full-scale war, this will be, I'm not going to say that the immediate total collapse, but this would be probably the beginning of the collapse of regional integration and their whole appeasement of Iran. So this is a very sensitive spot.
Exactly. Can I go ahead? I'll
just say one more thing, because I'll tell you what another calculation was. There will come a time. Hezbollah is now escalating the northern front. There will come a time when no Israeli prime minister would be able to not escalate in the north. Now, what I think they will do now, there will be no ground invasion right now. But they will start using the Air Force more forcefully. But I can tell you that some on the right are already saying, look, we have to take out Hezbollah at some point. Preferably, this would be done after there's another administration. Hopefully, says the right here, it will not be a Democratic administration after the next elections. But if this escalates out of hand before that, the talk is that a full-scale war with Hezbollah would mean massive damage and death in Tel Aviv, not just not just soldiers on the front. The weapons that Hezbollah has and the amount, this is 10 times what Hamas had, probably more in the terms of an arsenal of rockets and precision weaponry also. So the calculation is that if this war starts and would bring great devastation all over Israel, no American administration will be able to just stand idly by, because the American public, if it sees Israel in mortal danger, would not let its administration go as far as it is trying now. Now, this is a very dangerous gamble, but if a war would be imposed on us, I'm just giving you the heads up that this is an argument seriously being made here.
Good. I want to, let me say a couple things in response to what you said. I wasn't arguing with you before about this. I'm arguing with Nadav Eyal and Ben Caspit and Nahum Barnea and so on, because I wanted, I know that you and I are on the same page on this, but I want to stress the complete nonsensical, what's the word? Complete contradiction in the thinking of all of those people who are saying that Biden is trying to put together a regional coalition against Iran, and if we will just accept the two-state solution on Gaza, then we'll normalize with Saudi Arabia and we'll put together this coalition. That is it's ridiculous in many respects, but in the most immediate way, it's ridiculous with respect to Lebanon. I spoke to some Israelis yesterday, Israelis and the Israeli government, and these are not senior officials, but people, I'd say mid-level officials. I don't know where the line of senior is. But I was interested in, I was really struck by a fact that they did not have a grasp of the Amos Hochstein initiative and what it meant. And that was really telling to me, that people who were so well informed about the war did not know that the Biden administration was negotiating a peace in Lebanon. It's a kind of self-activating clause in the peace agreement that Biden is trying to in the ceasefire that Biden is trying to negotiate in Gaza. At the same time, the administration is putting together a whole regional package so that the war in the north will stop immediately, and that involves Israeli territorial concessions and massive international investment in South Lebanon, which means strengthening Hezbollah. That's what it means. It's got to be absolutely unacceptable to the Israelis. The Israeli public has not been informed about this. That some of the press has discussed it here and there, but they don't understand it. They haven't followed it, they haven't tracked it, and they haven't connected what the Americans are negotiating in Lebanon with what they're negotiating in Gaza. They have a whole regional picture here, which is going to leave Hezbollah strengthened on the border against Israel. It's completely unacceptable. People need to be aware of this, and it's an argument against Nadav Eyal and Ben Caspit and Nahum Barnea and Tom Friedman and all these other jokers who are claiming that there's some kind of Biden attempt to weaken Iran. That's one thing. The other thing I want to put on into our discussion here is Netanyahu. The invitation. I should have put it in the news. Netanyahu is going to come, and I think I'm right in saying he's going to be the first non-American to address both houses of Congress more than once. So he's now surpassing Churchill.
Churchill did only once?
I believe so. Yeah. I could be wrong. We need to check that. Let's crowdsource it here and ask our legions of listeners to check this for us. Am I right about that? But anyway, whether I'm right or wrong, it's quite an amazing achievement, and it's got to be just They are so angry about this in the White House. I just thinking, but who's most angry about it, Gadi? And how do we know?
McGurk?
No. Come on.
Jake?
Barack Obama.
Barack
Obama, who after October 7th, it wasn't until Monday night. So what's that? The 7th, 8th, the 9th. The night of the 9th, he finally tweeted that his displeasure with what was happening in the Gaza, Gaza envelope. It took him a couple of days before he said anything. I can't remember. It was kind of mealy-mouthed anyway.
Mike, he's retired and he's out of it. He's not paying attention to politics. Have you not noticed?
No, because the minute Biden made his initiative on last Friday, Obama came out and supported it immediately because it's personal for him. Boy, does he wants to bring down Netanyahu. That's what he wants to do, and that's the number one goal here. So Netanyahu is also calculating that he can come to Washington and shift opinion here. I hope that Netanyahu raises two major issues when he comes here. I hope he says this is a war between Iran. I hope he frames it in his comments just like he did the first time he addressed both houses of Congress. This is a war between Iran and the United States, between the Iranian alliance system and the American alliance system, and Israel is on the front lines fighting for itself, but for the West entirely. And that's how we have to understand this. And the major front in this war, in the end, is going to be in the north, in Lebanon, and the status quo is completely unacceptable there. If he needs to lay down that marker. The majority of Americans will support him 100% on this, and it will put Biden in a very difficult position. Until now, Netanyahu, because of all those, all the dependencies of the IDF on the Americans and the Israelis, need for American political cover, Netanyahu has not argued against Biden on the Iran question. He's been very careful to avoid talks about Gaza, talks about Hamas. every now and then he'll say a little something about Iran, but he's been very, very deferential to Biden in terms of not making this about Iran. But ultimately, this is about Iran, and I think he'll miss a huge opportunity when he comes to Congress if he doesn't say that. It's risky to come and poke Biden in the eye in an election year in this way, but I think the existential necessity means you need to take this risk.
So removing Netanyahu became a chief goal of this administration. And let me play for you a clip of an ex-senator, Claire McCaskill, who put out this statement.
The most important goal, I believe, for this presidency right now is to get Netanyahu to resign. And Netanyahu is holding on to power by his fingernails because of the far right, who sees the destruction of Gaza and all areas of any Palestinians in Israel as their goal. Their goal is very extreme, and that's how he is in power. So if he backs up on them, he cannot be in power anymore because he doesn't have the coalition he needs. So I think that Biden has to continue to try to press other people in the Israeli government to move as quickly and as strongly as they can to get Netanyahu out of that position.
Beautiful smile, you have to confess, but she's an ex-senator.
I think that that's a very important statement, actually, even though she herself is not in power. This is not a lady who was just expressing her, in my view, this is not a lady who was just expressing her point of view while reading the news. She's been briefed by the White House, and she is expressing the views of the White House as if it's her opinion. This is, of course, also what Tom Friedman has said a couple of months ago after talking to Anthony Blinken. Tom Friedman has said the number one goal to save Israel
is replacing this government. And of course, she's also repeating the refrain that that's what's holding Netanyahu from making concessions is his right flank, those radicals who want to eradicate the Palestinians, the Smotrich and Ben Gvir. Of course, he's a hostage of Smotrich and Ben Gvir. So let me just update you on a new poll just presented recently at a Jerusalem Post conference in New York that said that Israeli opinion has shifted strongly to the right, so that the number of Israelis who are against the Palestinian state had arisen after October 7th from 59% to 68%. Among Jews, it's from 69% to 79%, almost 80%. And among the general public, which includes the Arab citizens of Israel, 64% are against the Palestinian state, even if this will include a normalization deal with Saudi Arabia. So there is a vast majority of Israelis who clearly understand that we have to win this war, that we can't make a deal with the Fatah, the Palestinian Authority, which is controlled by the PLO, and all this maneuvering to try and replace Netanyahu with Gantz is, as we have been saying all along, just a pie in the sky.
Can you just run those numbers by again? They were amazing. But I've already lost them in my head.
The number of the percentage of Israelis who were against a Palestinian state in the 67 lines before October 7 were 59. That's almost 60, and after October 7th, it rose to 68%. Now, remember, Israel has a 20% Arab majority whose opinion, Arab minority whose opinions on this are very different from the Jewish majority. And if you take the Jewish majority alone, then the number of people who are against a Palestinian state had risen from 69%, almost 70, to almost 80. 79%.
Wow. So Israeli Jews Israeli Jews are almost at 80% against the Palestinian state.
Yeah, 4-1. They against the Palestinian state. So
okay. All right. So you've been saying this all along, and we have to give you credit because when the Gantz ultimatum came out, we're 4 days away from that fateful moment.
Yeah.
Right. I just can't wait to see what happens. I noticed a poll at the end of last week, or maybe the beginning of it was the end of last week, where he's dropping. He's dropping, which is exactly what you predicted. You said the difficult thing for him is how can he leave the table and take all the chips with him? Because he got the chips by coming to the table. So how do you leave the table with the chips? And it turns out that he's not going to be able to do it. And this is what I find amusing here about all this is not so much Gantz's calculations, but that the American miscalculation, because the thing, Gadi, that everyone needs to understand is that the Obama and all the staffers, his staffers who are now the Biden staffers and Biden himself, they hate Netanyahu. They hate him. They really, really hate him. They hate him like they hate no one else on the international scene. They don't have as much hatred for Khamenei, Putin, Xi Jinping as they have. I'm serious. I'm serious, because
it's the same here.
And so they hate him because why? The number one reason is this invitation to come talk to the two houses of Congress. He's unique among foreign politicians that he can speak to the American people over the heads of the American leadership, and the American leadership hates that. They feel like they're it's not just the politicians, also the national security professionals. They feel like they're the stewards of the national interest. It's like the establishment, the defense establishment in Israel, the Tzava Sheyesh LaMedina. They think that this is their preserve. Who is this foreigner who, and not just a foreigner, he's a foreigner of a little state that is dependent on the United States, coming in and telling us what our policy should be and forcing us to address him. This is a deformation of the natural order of the world, and it drives them nuts. So they really want to destroy him. And here's the funny thing, though. They're not paying attention to this kind of poll, and they're not talking to Israelis who speak with authority to them about Israeli politics, who reflect the opinion in that poll. When they go and they first of all, they're talking to Glansenkot, number one, right? And so, I mean, if you imagine the cables that the ambassador is sending back to Washington that get read. I mean, the reporting, one of the main things that the State Department does is it reports, the embassy reports to Washington what's going on in Israel. There's tons of reporting coming out of the embassy to Washington about what you just read, the polling. But the stuff that the senior leaders are reading, what are they reading? They're reading stuff from the ambassador when he goes and he talks to Glansenkot. And then if they want to get the right-wing view, they talk to Bennett, they talk to Avigdor Lieberman, they talk to Gideon Sa'ar. So there'll be a whole cable on what Gideon, and what are they all saying? Bring down Netanyahu. Now's the moment. Bring down Netanyahu. And so they think they have this whole, they think they're trapping Netanyahu, and they're presenting it. Look how they presented even Biden in his speech on Friday. That was very telling when he said that there are elements of the coalition that are going to scuttle this incredible deal that will solve all of Israel's problems. But Smotrich and Ben-Gvir are getting in the way. But it's not Smotrich and Ben-Gvir. They've read it entirely wrong, and they're going to fail on this. This is why Netanyahu's he's found the issue that is of most concern to the Israelis, where he has the most legitimacy, and he keeps banging away on it. And I think it's not going to be a winning position.
I don't think he found the issue. I think his instincts are, look, Netanyahu's self-conception is historical. His father is a very serious historian. He's an avid reader.
I think some people say avid and some people say avid. It's like tomato and tomato.
An editing program that people call avid. So I get confused at least. And Netanyahu has a historical perspective, and in his mind, his job, it's like Churchill. His job is to take the Jewish people from the 90s, where he first assumed power, to wherever he can in safety. The safety of the Jewish people is entrusted in his hands. So his sense of historical mission, it's not just he found an issue and it's an electoral thing. And whenever people say Netanyahu's personal blah, 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 for a person like that, there is no difference between the personal and the historical mission. He is the historical mission that he imagines, and he cannot, this is not a burden that he thinks he can lay down. This also explains his tenacity in many respects. I have one more comment before our time is ending, before we go to the dumbest take. And I want to tell you something more. It's very convincing what you say about why they hate him in the White House. But there is also an ongoing feud between internationalists or globalists and patriots, as we know, and Israel is the prime example. We both are admirers of the guy who wrote this book, which I have on my desk, and you probably recognize easily, Mr. John Fonte, who wrote this book, Sovereignty or Submission. In the opening chapters, he said, the model for people who discuss globalism is Rome and Jerusalem. Rome represents universality, the idea that under one government there will be a Pax Romana, there will be a universal peace. And on the other hand, there are the particularists and the nationalists, and they are embodied in the Western tradition, since all Westerners, Christians, and Jews alike read the Bible. This is the people of Israel are the prime example of the particularist and the nationalist. So there is the nation on the one hand and the universal on the other. And so the hatred of Netanyahu is also immersed in the hatred of the rejection of nationalism, of which Israel is an embodiment. I'm sure you have a lot to say about this too. I'll just say I totally agree with you. It's something we need to talk more about. But you can always say that, Mike. I totally agree with you, and we should talk more about it, but not now.
Okay.
And let's keep this topic alive, because I think that we always discuss the Middle East policy of this administration, but this administration leans strongly to the progressive / globalist side, and so that's an important factor.
100%. I agree 100%.
I'll cut this and put it on Twitter. So for the
as always, Gadi, I agree.
Always. That's a welcome correction, Mike. And so now I want to play. I had a lot to say about this. We're running out of time. Let's just play it as is. This is Professor Yael Sternhal. She's a professor of history, daughter of the famous professor of history, Ze'ev Sternhal, who was a pundit in Haaretz, and she is now a board member of the New Israel Fund. And all I told you about the position of the left, here it is for you in one little clip. Let's see, Yael.
The Biden administration is finally, many years after we in the human rights camp in Israel have started lobbying for it, the Biden administration is finally using its powers of sanction against the radical elements of the settler movement in a way that could have a real impact and that could show Israelis what it means to get on the bad side of an American administration. And these are extremely important initiatives that already have and will have even further meaning and impact on the ground in the occupied territories. We know that if Trump assumes power again, that this initiative, this movement towards limiting and asking for accountability of the Israeli settler movement will stop.
It's not in this clip, but she also said that the Biden administration should deprive Israel of ammunition in order to press it to stop this horrendous war. So you see, these are people on the left now, and
that's insane. That's insane.
But this mentality in the left is much more prevalent than we like to think. These people are rooting for American pressure because they've grown up on the idea that only this will save us from the terrible Ben Gvir and Smotrich. Mike,
you know what they haven't woken up to. And I mean, it's obvious because we keep saying it, but it's always striking to me because I'm focused like a laser on the Iran question, and they have not woken up even after October 7th to the vulnerability of Israel to the Iranians. They still don't see it. They think, and they believe all this nonsense about normalization with Saudi Arabia and the United States will take care of it. The benevolent American umbrella. They really, I think Israelis should understand that they woke up on October 8th back in the 1930s. They thought they were a regional superpower. They thought they were that history was moving in a direction that was very favorable to them, and they thought that all these struggles of the past that led to the 67 war and the 73 war, that these things were ancient history, and they're wrong. They're wrong.
Well,
they're just wrong. They're just wrong, and I'm not. It pains me to hear somebody say something so stupid.
Well, the difference between the 30s and now is that we do have a state and we do have an army.
Yeah, okay. It was a tendentious statement. It was a ridiculous statement in the 30s, but you're a country under existential threat is the issue.
No, Mike. People are waking up from nightmares about the 30s. It's not something abstract. Some people feel that the arrow of time has been bent backwards, and certainly
it has
because of the horrors, and of course because of the not collapse yet, but the decline of the international order that we believed in. We are completely out of time now, and so
I want to say one thing. Can I stretch our time a little bit? I have an Israeli friend. He's American who immigrated to Israel. He's in his 90s now, and he's extremely left wing. But he's like family to me. I love the guy, but we had this argument for a long time, where I was telling him there's no more anti-Semitism in America really to speak of. There's no anti-Semitism on the right. Anti-Semitism is all on the left, and it's coming from the university elite and so on. And he has said, don't kid yourself. Yes, that exists, but he said anti-Semitism is always there. It never goes away. And I totally disagreed with him. And I have to say that he's right, and I was wrong. I wasn't wrong about the anti-Semitism on the left and the anti-Semitism coming out of the universities, but I didn't realize. I thought, to me, the thing that proved that it doesn't really exist, widely in American society, was the whole Bernie Madoff scandal. If ever there was a scandal that was kind of tailor-made to excite the anti-Semites, it was Bernie Madoff, and there wasn't even a hint of it anywhere after that. I thought, look, it's quite amazing. America doesn't, if this was in Europe, the people would be talking about the Jewish con man and so on, and they didn't do it. But all of a sudden, they're coming out of the woodwork everywhere, on the left, on the right. The bloodlust is sickening and amazing, and I have to say it. In the Haggadah, don't you say, what is it? Every generation has to learn anew, or so there's some phrase you say. So in every generation,
They rise against us to
They
destroy.
rise up against us. Apparently, this is the case. All right, it's amazing to me. I mean, I think I follow this stuff pretty closely, and I find myself shocked. So if I were Jewish, my head would be spinning right now.
I forget where the quote is from, who said that anti-Semitism is a light sleeper. But this apparently is the case. So that's all from us for this episode, and we will be with you on the eve of Shavuot next week on Tuesday.
Which is the Gantz ultimatum, right?
No, it's after the Gantz ultimatum.
Wow.
On the other side of
on the other side, will be the other side of this historic turning point.
It will be a different world when we see you guys again. It's a pleasure speaking with you, Mike, and I'll see you too in a week.